Internet, welcome to the Collective Arcana, a channel all about tabletop gaming. So today we're going to talk about how to play D&D for free or to play cheap if you want to throw a couple bucks into it.
Right. There's can be a bit of a misconception about the game. A lot of people feel like you need to spend a large amount of money to play, or that there's some sort of barrier of entry. And we want to dispel some of those myths, talk about the cheapest, basically freest ways that you can play the game.
Yeah, so I know for first off, you might think you need to pay for dice. You can get an app for that.
Dice app, yes.
Also, Roll20. You can kind of knock out quite a bit on Roll20 if you're playing online. That's free.
Yes. In fact, again, I think we sort of said in another video, if you haven't looked into Roll20 yet and you don't have people in your area to play with, definitely check it out. It's a fantastic resource. It has a built-in tabletop, dice rollers, character sheets, the works. It's really, really a handy tool. Yeah,
and even if you're playing in person, you can probably just get a dice app or whatever. But dice are fairly cheap. You can get those like on Amazon for like nothing. So
yeah. Well, and we'll probably mention a few things throughout this episode, things that you and your party might pool a few dollars in to really enhance your game. If you all are on a budget. Right, absolutely.
Okay, so aside from dice, I think the biggest cost is usually the actual player or the DM's guide and the player's guide. That stuff is expensive. But there are some ways around that. Yes.
So you could, of course, spend it. There's a lot of deals all the time, especially for like the full collector's sets. You can get them for significantly below the general retail. But that is still excess of $60 to $80, depending on which deal you find.
And what game you play.
Yes. And let's go ahead and get something out of the way really quickly. If you are going to buy the books, generally speaking, Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master Guide, Monster Manual, those are your big three. Depending on which version you're getting, you may need fewer books, but you will never need anything outside of those three. Everything else is just extras and fun and fluff and not at all necessary to enjoy the game.
But you don't have to buy the books.
Yes, you don't have to buy them at all. And here's the rub. So if you use an app like Roll20, which we sort of mentioned earlier, you're going to have access to a lot of the rules there, especially as far as character creations, access to spell descriptions, things like that for most popular systems. Beyond that, almost every system is going to have some sort of an online resource, a system reference document or SRD, and you can use that to get not the most well laid out or most intuitive to use, but very complete set of rules. It's going to have everything to make characters, run combats, create monsters, things like that. Or, stat out monsters.
I was thinking though, so let's say you've never played before, but you want to try it. I would think that it would be better to just like sort of make up a little role play game rather than trying to do D&D with D&D rules.
Sure,
just like have like a little prompt and just do, like a theater of the mind type thing. And you don't need any books for that. That's a great way, I think, to get started. You don't need any maps. Like it's all...
No, absolutely. There are a lot of things you can find online. Just Google one-page RPGs. And they're just these fun little things. You can see the Cast of Critical Role play a few of them. Honey Heist and Crash Pandas, I think, is the other one. And they're very incredibly simple games with simple core mechanics that really focus on role-playing and sort of situational comedy stuff. Beyond that, and beyond those SRDs, you could always just sit in as a player to learn to see if you like a game. That's what I always recommend. Yeah. Some people, of course, don't have that option. Maybe the internet isn't good enough for you to play online. Maybe there's nobody local that you can get a game with.
I think Roll20 has can you find a game on there?
Sure, yeah. You can do looking for group.
I've done that before. But...
And some are pretty much open to anybody. Some do have like applications where you need to submit your character concept and things like that.
Probably not a good starter group.
Not necessarily.
You apply.
Well, it's not like a job application generally. It's more like wanting to feel out to get an idea if you're the kind of person they want to play with. Some people don't like min-maxers at all, munchkins they call them. Other people just want to make sure that you want to play the kind of character that can exist in their homebrew world, that sort of thing. And some of them may not even necessarily, just outright veto your character. They might just say, well, if you change this or that. But some of them can be very strict. Some of them really will treat it like a job application. And that may not be the kind of party you at least want to start with. But there are plenty of people that are just looking for players, plenty of groups just looking for DMs especially.
Yeah.
So if you're brave enough to just jump in on that end, go for it.
Yeah, I would try to start with your friends, but also we should mention today we went to a used bookstore.
Yes, we did.
And we found quite a bit of stuff on sale for really cheap. Again, so you can still do this for free. We're just kind of trying to fill out the different options, and if you do have a couple of bucks if you want to get a book. I know personally I like the feel of the book, and I like not having electronics with my D&D stuff. Even when we play on Roll20, I still keep like a real character sheet. But
well, and for a lot of people, especially right now, I think a big draw of the game is that it's something you can do away from screens. It's real human interaction sort of thing.
Yeah.
So for a lot of people, it's going to appeal to have physical books over a digital tool or even like an online resource like an SRD. So with that said, of course, there's free with the SRD or little light games like the
Pathfinder's completely free online.
Yes.
Always.
Yes, so Pathfinder, not only is there an SRD for first and second edition, but as part of the open gaming, Pathfinder Paizo, the publisher, is supporting a great deal of ways to gain access to their new books. So you can do, of course, the physical hardcover, very nice books. You can also do the PDFs, which are significantly cheaper than getting the physical book and go on sale a lot more than the physical books will. And then finally, there's the SRD or the actual fully supported by Paizo Archives of Nethys, which was formerly being updated about 2 weeks after new content comes out. Now I just saw on their website the other day that they're totally up to date. Same day it launches in physical format or any format, they're going to have it updated on the site. So that's a huge resource. If you want to try out a game, Pathfinder 2nd Edition is really pushing for accessibility to pretty much everybody. Beyond that, you can always go for some older systems. So if you go to D&D 3.5 or 4.0 or Pathfinder 1st Edition, you're going to find a lot of people are trading those books in at used bookstores or just anybody who's clearing out inventory, any like online retailers or even local brick and mortar if you have one in your area. Probably looking to move some of that older content and hoping to do so at pretty cheap prices. So definitely look into that.
That's what we saw today.
And then finally, if you really just want to role play, if that's really what you want to try, you can just almost like an improv game, just sit around with a group of friends, have somebody sort of lead the narrative and everybody just like a dungeon master would, and then everybody else as players. And you don't need any rules. You could maybe keep dice around in case, as just flat rolls, trying to roll above a 10 to determine success or failure sort of thing.
This will work good too if you have kids you want to try.
Yeah.
You maybe have a couple of base stats that you just make up or something, but...
Well, one thing you can do if you want to sort of get a feel for D&D, one great way that you can play a very simplified version of Dungeons & Dragons is go online, figure out how to generate strength, dex, con, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, those 6 scores, and go from there. I would say if you're using just those 3 numbers, maybe instead of a D20, roll a D6, which most people are going to have a 6-sided die in the house, pop
Any
open
board game.
any board game, yeah. And go from there, and then you can just, anything above a 5 is a guaranteed success sort of thing, whatever the math works out when you're looking at it. And really, that's a great way to introduce kids. Everything is either going to be an intelligence or, just break it down to those simple stats. Running, climbing, swimming, all, your physical stats sort of things. And then figuring anything else out, just tie to mental stats. You don't have to worry about bonuses and skills and things. A lot of games really do function sort of like that.
Yeah. I mean, Honey Heist is free too.
Honey Heist is free, Crash Pandas, and I mean, there's all sorts of those one-page RPGs.
Yeah,
I wish I knew the name of the guy who made both Honey Heist and Crash Pandas.
I'll look it up and I'll put it right here.
Do somewhere.
Critical Role did Honey Heist, a couple Honey Heist one-shots that are on YouTube if you want to just watch it and see if that looks like something you might want to try.
I think they've done 2 or 3 Honey Heists, and they've done a Crash Pandas, and both are just really funny, silly ways to just sit around with some friends.
But you don't have to play them silly either if you don't want to.
No, yeah, you could play a really gritty Honey Heist if you want
really
to.
funny.
Yeah.
Oh wait, I just said be serious though. But I mean, there are systems like that, but you don't have to do silly, goofy ones.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so just, I think we've done a good job of telling you how you can get around having to buy expensive books. And again, you can always just find them on sale if you're willing to spend a little bit of money. We like that, but at the end of the day, if price is your primary deciding factor, there's plenty of ways around that, okay?
Yeah, I mean, we get the books because literally our whole house revolves around D&D, and we just like to have them. But I mean, you don't have to have them, especially if you're not sure you want to commit to this a whole world, because this is a lifestyle.
It can be, yeah,
It can be all-consuming.
And so I sort of mentioned, pooling resources together. Especially if you're in high school or junior high or something, and nobody's really got disposable income, they can do whatever they want with without any questions asked. You could really start with a player's handbook. You could all pitch in together. If you got 5 or 6 players, you could find it for. You could be spending as little as $5 to $10 a piece.
Yeah.
And getting that book,
Especially
and then
if it's used.
yeah, and then move on and get the monster manual next, and then things like that. And then the Dungeon Master's Guide. The reality with the Dungeon Master's Guide, it sounds like this really important book. There's nothing that's going to teach you to be a dungeon master, that book included.
That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah, it's great for loot tables. It's great for rules on magic items and some of the trickier, in-depth rules like that. But as far as actually teaching you to run a game, it's not going to do that job. I've not ever really seen anything that can. That's sort of why we're doing the DM 101 guide, hoping to at least help out with that. But it really is a very difficult thing to do in terms of teaching someone to do it.
Jump in, huh?
That's the only, in my opinion, that's the only way to do it. You can be prepared, and that's great, and you should read up, know the rules, things like that.
Yeah.
Know how to educate is very important, and that's just saying this is the rule that I'm going to lay down for this instance. Making judgment calls, especially in 5th edition, that's very important. 5th edition is a great beginner game for DMs because they do not require you to memorize a lot of rules. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of judgment calls, and it's designed that way for the DM to do that. It can also be scary because if you're very new to the game, you might prefer to have hard rules that you can look to. And 5th edition doesn't have as much of that as a sturdier, more crunchy game like Pathfinder, for example, or even earlier D&D games. With that said, I would say on average, those lighter games, Fate and 5th edition, are going to be easier because they're a lot more forgiving if you don't know the rules. Is
Fate a book, or is it something you can just download? Or?
So you can find Fate online as a PDF. It is made by, I believe, Mad Hat Games, I think is who makes it. Yeah. And it's Fate Core is what it's called, FATE, all capital, Core. It's a very literary sort of, it feels like you're playing a pulp book. Everything is, you have very few actual stats. You have a physical stress, a mental stress, and then you have a few skills. I think there's maybe 10 or 11 of them. And everything else just sort of goes from what you decide to do.
You could probably just watch a video on how to play Fate and make something up off of that.
You could. I will say that while it's a great, while it can be a very simple game, it does take a certain kind of player. If your players aren't prone to role play, they may not enjoy Fate because it's a very abstract game. Things aren't measured in distances of number of feet kind of thing.
That might be a good thing. It depends on what they're intimidated by.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just like it depends on what you're intimidated by as a DM. Do you want to run 5th edition where you don't have to memorize a lot of rules, but you do have to make a lot of judgment calls? Or do you want to play something like Pathfinder where there's a lot of rules to memorize, but if you don't know what to do, you can also look up a solution. Okay, we've talked about rules and we've talked about dice and dice apps. So the next thing would be character sheets. The good news is those can generally be printed for whatever it costs you to get something printed. If you have your own printer, that would be virtually free.
You have a friend with an office job.
An office job. I won't tell anybody. And if you go to school, you might have printing options there. And then worst case scenario, you can always head to your local FedEx type place.
You've got to know someone with a printer, right?
Hopefully, and again, the library. Hopefully you have a library in your area. They can be very reasonable, if not free.
If you really, really didn't have enough money to print a character sheet, then you can just write it out.
You totally can write it out. You absolutely can. You can boil it down to the most important things, or you can just freehand it. Look at one, copy it down. It's full disclosure. I've definitely done that on more than one occasion.
I was going to say, actually, when I first started playing, we ran these little scrimmages with just the two of us, just for me to kind of practice. And he made these little index cards with very, very basic stats. Couple skill points, I think, like perception, and they were all handwritten on an index card. And it was a really good way to learn because it wasn't overwhelming. So maybe I said that jokey, but it's actually maybe a good idea to do it that way.
Yeah, just boil it down to what. Especially like what we were doing, we were just running skirmishes. We were just running simple little combats to get her used to how combat and action economy works. And so, it was just physical attack, stats, HP, AC, saves, and then a few relevant skill checks. Not even like some of the social ones, because we were just doing combat, so it was just things like stealth, perception, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it actually worked out great for first time. And even with the first games we played, you weren't referencing any kind of book, or it was pretty much.
No, and that's got a lot to do with practice.
Well, yeah, you knew a lot of stuff, already, obviously.
Yeah,
but.
Again, I come from a very homebrew heavy mindset. So for me, I never have a problem with deciding on a rule last minute or just sort of improvising something on the spot. I have a pretty general understanding of the rules for the games that I run, which are generally 3.5 Pathfinder and now moving on to Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So I've got enough system mastery there that I can finagle something. I can make something work out. It may not always be the exact right thing by the book, but it's something that my players are all comfortable with, and they know that I'm not going to do anything to hinder them on purpose. They trust me. That's trust is key with any DM player relationship. So
yeah, and so actually on that topic, moving on, one of the scrimmages we did, and hang on, what did you know about this guy?
No. Oh my gosh, Ghost Spider.
I'm back. Okay, so one of my first fights that you set up for me, we found these Halloween spiders in November for I think they were $1 or something. They might have been less than $1.
They could have been 88 cents on crazy discount.
And it was from Target. All of their Halloween shit was on sale. So these little dudes are there's a ton of them in here. And they all attacked me. And so we just kind of want to talk about this next because I just found out that he came with this.
Ghost Spider, Invisible Spider.
He didn't know this when he attacked me the first time.
If I had, you would have been Ghost Spider.
Because he was in the middle of all these. I'm going to use this on my one shot, then I'm going to make him eat you.
You don't know that there's spiders in the mines of Fendelvin.
I'm the DM. What I say goes. Anyway, so so we're gonna talk about that next. What can you use for minis? Minis are interesting because while not expensive, they don't come painted, and then you have to learning how to paint is a whole other thing.
Well, and when we say
you can't get them painted.
When we say not expensive, I mean individually.
Individually, not expensive.
Not expensive. It can add up very quickly. One thing that you may want to do is just start with your player characters. You know, that's a nice, great way to start. Everybody's got a little mini that represents their characters. And then the rest you can use some tokens. So, you know, you have, so you can purchase these wonderful minis, and we will certainly put some pictures online, or just look at many other videos on our channel.
I'm sure you know what a mini is.
Yes. And they can run between $2 and $5 up to $15 a piece.
You get like the 2 packs for like $4 or something.
Right, or on Reaper's website, you can generally get an individual mini for $2.99, and it's exactly what you want.
But that doesn't really fall so much in our free to super cheap category, so
exactly.
We wanted to talk about some other alternatives you could do, like the Halloween spiders.
Right. So one thing that I really did throughout most of my time playing D&D is, rather than have minis, I would just use spare dice. Everybody's got dice. You can use different, you know, the larger numbered dice to represent larger creatures on your map, that sort of thing. And then for maps, we would use pieces of paper, gridded out. I eventually did move to a pre-made, like a piece of plexiglass that I had drawn a grid on, which I really liked because you could, I had drew the grid on the bottom so you can see the grid, put it over white paper, but then you can also draw on top of it for like different types of map indicators and
that can be a little tedious, but it's so worth it because we have a couple of handmade maps like that too. Like we have a grass one you'll see in a lot of our videos. Just a ruler and a Sharpie. We use that thing all the time.
Absolutely.
It was worth the, you know, time to make it, and it cost that, again, clearance. We got it from the craft store.
And like model train section.
Yeah, the Christmas railroads.
Yes, Christmas terrain, which Christmas is coming up. Once that's over, a lot of little model village things, you'll be able to get some really cool like cobblestone, just flat pieces of vinyl that look like cobblestone, which can be great.
We did some cool buildings with that. I'll do a video on that later.
Yeah, we cut up the brick and we
put a picture
basically
of it,
like upholstered some like bird houses with it. It turned out surprisingly well. Not as great as some other things you could make, but pretty quick and pretty cheap. And
we could put a lot of time in it, make it look better too. But I'll do a little video on that. That was kind of a spur of the moment thing we did.
So let's go ahead and talk about the different options you have instead of purchasing either pre-painted or...
Yes, we should get back to minis, sorry. So what if you didn't want to pay for minis or paint for minis, or maybe you don't have access to minis, which is, I think, probably a lot of people's don't actually have game stores and they can't just order stuff, maybe if they're not 18 and don't have their own...
Or you just don't know exactly what you are looking for. You know, like, do you want to spend, you know, $20 to $40 on a few little pieces of plastic, and you're not even sure if you're going to enjoy them, or, you know, exactly what you want? Because the thing is, it's a slippery slope. It's called plastic crack.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, I'll be like, well, I can't even run this encounter. I don't have this monster. And that's false, okay? That's an addict talking.
I'm going to play this back the next time we're at the D&D store.
No, you're not, because you're going to want dice. So,
okay, so what else can they use if they don't have extra dice or don't want to use extra dice? Or they don't have access to minis?
So my first step towards having minis was after I made that grid, and we'll talk about the difference between theater of the mind and using grids and tokens in a moment. There's great benefits to both, and I do want to get into that. But my first step towards using the minis, the reason that I took that step was because we found that combat encounters got a little bit bogged down with people not agreeing where they were. Like, I would describe a scene, and then my players would describe where they wanted to move to.
Oh, without a map, you mean?
And without a map, there would invariably, not necessarily every encounter or anything, but you know, issues would arise where somebody would say, "Oh, I didn't think I was near that guy. I wouldn't have moved to that guy."
Tough with a lot of when there's a lot of little dudes attacking your party.
For sure, and if you're doing theater of the mind and you describe this really complicated underground mine with all these different levels and stuff, and then one guy's like, "I wasn't even up there." you know.
Yeah.
So you want, so that's why we moved to tokens to avoid those sort of things. And it really does, in a lot of ways, it speeds up encounters to have them. In some ways, it also can, I think, take you out of the moment in the encounters. It feels much more gamey. Whereas, and I'm sure you've seen the few times that we've done Theater of the Mind in our games, where it really does feel a little more visceral. It feels more like you're part of a story, like things are really happening to you. Whereas, when you have those tokens and that map out, it can feel a little gamey.
I have to say though, I have a really hard time following without the map.
Sure.
And I'm just one of those people who.
Some people are very visual.
Yeah, I'm just like I get confused about where things are, and I mean.
And that's exactly why I
think
moved to it. Yeah.
There are people like me that have very busy brains and think about too many things at one time, and then they're not fully focused on any one thing, and then they're like, "Wait, where are we?" And it's not because we're not paying attention. It's just because, like, especially as a magic user, I'm like, well. What spells should I use here? What would be the right thing to use here? What would just fail? And then, like, you're also trying to listen to everyone else's turn. And, yeah, so I personally, like, need the map.
Yeah, it's got huge benefits. Overall, I prefer it.
It works if there's one bad guy in a simple room, which is what happened pretty recently. It ended up being a really cool scene or whatever, but it was like a really engaging fight, and I didn't get confused in that one.
Well, and the other time that you might see it is in a situation where there is something not quite a conventional combat, like a chase scene, or maybe somebody moving through a crowd or something along those lines, where if it was just a map with a couple of minis on it, it becomes this very rote, I move, I attack, whatever. Whereas when your DM is just telling you he's getting away, it becomes a much more frantic sort of thought process of how do I stop him from getting away. So without further ado.
Yeah, we've let him on for a while.
We have. So hopefully this isn't a huge letdown. When I first started moving away from just using dice on sheets of paper with vague sort of grids or things like that indicated on them, I moved to these little wooden tokens, and hopefully you can see that there.
Take a picture of it.
And I started drawing little doodles on them of characters, sort of. Oh, and he's gone. And I made them reversible just so that I could, get as much mileage out of them as possible.
And these are just little wooden pog things from any craft store has them cheap. There's always a 40% off coupon on the app.
No matter where
Scan your phone.
Uh-huh.
You don't need that. You can use cardboard, another option.
But they come in multiple sizes. But you could use coins,
paper,
paper, anything. You can, if you don't draw, you can cut out from magazines. You can print, whatever you want to do.
You would just do colors, like.
Well, and that's sort of what I was going to say next. Is that if you don't draw at all, you could just have tokens like this. Like this is sort of a generic. This is a bad guy little token. Just a little.
Just draw some emojis.
Yeah, just draw little emojis. You can even
draw a V for the eyebrows, 2 dots, and then a squiggle mouth.
Because he's mad.
That's the bad guy.
So, in addition to those, if you happen to have, and I know not everyone will, and truthfully, these are probably more expensive than buying D&D minis. But I used to be really into Legos. So, if you have some,
used to be.
Yeah. So, if you have a large number of Legos sitting around, especially fantasy themed ones, you can really make almost a little customizable. Pick your head, pick your armor, pick your weapon, pick your helmet.
You could even do that with just colored Legos.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, like you just take like different little 2x2 bricks, like the blue one is the dwarf,
Yeah, and that said too, it would be cheap if you have kids.
Yes.
And if you do have kids, or if you just still have a bunch of toys, just look at any toys. Like I read some people in the in the groups, they say that they've used like stuffed animals to start with, like whatever they could find.
Okay, I mean it's a pretty good likeness, and these were I think a couple of bucks. Tie into the most recent Jurassic Park.
The Dollar Tree, those little soldier things from the Dollar Tree.
Sure, yeah.
Just think outside the box. You can get really cheap toys again. Salvation Army, you know, thrift stores or something. Just like any toys.
Yeah, I mean, we got spiders for the rest of our lives, basically.
Yeah. Also, game board pieces.
Yeah, I mean, if you got like little sorry tokens and pawns, even Monopoly tokens.
Yep.
Anything. And then I've got here. So Pathfinder makes a wonderful little resource called Pathfinder Pawns.
Now this is not free or cheap.
No, this retails. Well, I mean, I think this one's out of production now. But something like it would retail for $40, and it came with.
It's cheap.
231.
Yeah,
tokens?
It's cheap compared to if you would have bought those in minis.
Right.
And again, that was one that we got at a used bookstore.
I think that one ended up being 20 something.
Was it 15 or 20?
I think it was 20 something.
So, I mean, if you think of it, if you're in, let's say you're totally into this, you're committed, but you're still not ready to, you don't have hundreds of dollars to put in too many because it gets...
Again, if you're for just one encounter, you can make an encounter, including your player characters. You could do that, sorry, dog. You could do that for $20, and then you could just, you know, every month put another 15, 20, and then next thing you know, you've got a habit.
Yes. We have so many.
And they're fun, and I love them, and I'm going to get more. So this is what they look like. They've got these very board game sort of little stands, and you can take them out, and they come in these big cardstock papers, and you just sort of punch out whichever ones you need to use. I've got a bag full of them that I was using there for a while before we switched to all minis. And I've got hundreds of these things, and they're wonderful. I still use them if I don't have a mini for the job.
Yeah. These are also good if you're like traveling to your games. We host our game, and the reason we don't ever go anywhere else is because we just have everything here. But there are a lot of people who have to drive to their game, and these are way more portable. You can't break them. Like,
I mean, you
can't break them, but
I mean, you could put 50 of these and enough tokens for your encounter on.
Very portable.
Yeah, in any little like a Crown Royal bag, which is classic D&D accessory. It's great to hold dice, minis, pretty much everything you need. So these are really great. The Pathfinder starter set. Beginner box, it comes with a whole bunch of these and stands and dice and character sheets. So, again, if you want a cheap way to get into the hobby, find one of those used for $24-ish, and you'll have literally everything you need. It comes with maps and everything.
I lost my spider.
Oh no.
Where'd he go?
So that's pretty much, all the different types of tokens you can use.
Literally any toy.
Anything, or just your spare dice. Coins.
Rip up some paper. Color it.
I mean, there's whatever you can use. Don't let that be a barrier to your game. So then, what are you going to use them on, right? So you have a couple of options. You can always get a chessboard. That's a nice grid, or a checkerboard. You can
probably already have.
Yeah, you might already have it. If not, you can go to the Dollar Tree. Yeah, ask your grandmother. Raid an elementary school toy closet like that.
That's probably not good advice.
But everybody's seen a checkerboard, familiar with it. It's a nice grid that you can use. Yeah. It may not be the exact 1 inch by 1 inch square grid kind of thing, but it is a square grid.
We should mention too, if you're using toys or anything weird like that, you might just get a little relaxed on the distance rules.
For sure. Or at the very least, like their size rules.
Yeah, just
that Triceratops I held up. If you want a bigger Triceratops, that's okay. He can be a bigger Triceratops.
Yeah.
We're all using our imagination for everything anyway. We might as well imagine that Triceratops is slightly bigger.
Yeah, because sometimes we'll have a map without a grid on it. Right? And you just sort of eyeball it. Yeah,
we've got some, like that cobblestone vinyl, doesn't have a grid drawn on it. And then some of my grassy pieces, I never put an actual grid on. And it works just fine. You can eyeball it if you really have to. You can get a ruler and play it that way, like you're playing Warcraft. It's less fun.
Game, though.
Yeah, I mean, I would say as a DM, just decide, can you get there or not? As long as you're fairly consistent and just telling your players, I'm sorry, you can't get there, or yes, you can get there, then there shouldn't be a problem. With that said, you can always go for this this sort of thing. This is graph paper. And graph paper is a wonderful old school tool. A pad of it's a little more expensive than if you were to just get, lined paper sort of thing. I guess those extra lines, the ink costs a lot.
You might be able to get those at the Dollar Tree.
You might be able to find
smaller.
some. Yeah, it's great. There's a million different uses for this in D&D, and I'm definitely going to do a video on how this and this next item I'm about to introduce are the last things you'd ever need to run very complex and interesting maps for your players, either for dungeon crawls or just encounter maps. So the next thing, as promised, this is a D&D, I'm not sure if this is actually licensed or not, but this is a leather map. It's a reversible.
It says battle map.
It's made by Chessex.
Yeah, it's Chessex.
Chessex, who make a lot of dice. They're one of the big dice manufacturers. So it also has the hexagons on the back.
Ours comes with dog slobber.
Yes, ours almost certainly has some dog slobber on it. So what's great about this is, first let me say up front, this is not necessarily gaming on the cheap. This is going to run you between $20 and $40, depending on which size you get, maybe even more, but maybe less if you find a good sale. What it is, however, is extremely reusable and pretty durable. I've had this for about 5 years. The edges are fraying, but the actual game surface
You've had that longer than 5 years.
Yeah, maybe 6, maybe even 7 or 8.
Did you buy it in West Virginia?
I did. So it's the edges are fraying a little bit, but that's okay. The actual surface that you play on is
It's also
very
been across
fresh.
the country a couple of times. So.
It has. So what's great about this map is you can draw on it with anything you want. Test a corner first. So every marker is going to be a little bit different.
I'm going to stop you there. I just saw some very, very upset posts about somebody who had been using dry erase markers on this.
Yeah,
don't do it.
Don't do dry erase markers.
Wet erase markers. So.
So Sharpies. You can use Sharpies on this thing.
I don't know if I would advise that.
Oh, I would. I've used Sharpies on them a lot. As always, test a corner of it that you're not going to use. Where this is reversible, I'm never going to use the hexagon, so I always test there. But Sharpie with alcohol, Sharpie with alcohol will clean up off of this.
Just don't let it sit.
With ease. And here's another pro tip.
If you let it sit, it might die.
It might. It might. Always clean up after every use. The other thing that you may find is if you go over Sharpie with Sharpie, it refreshes that Sharpie and you can clean it up even if it's set in. So this is a wonderful tool. It will last you for years, and you can draw anything you want. If you have different colored markers, you can show water, you can show this or that, whatever you need to do.
It can really be your only map you ever get.
Yes. 100% without a doubt. If you are dead set on playing with any sort of tokens, whether you're content with those little discs, or whether you're content with those little discs, or with the Pathfinder pawns, or you're going to make the jump into minis and terrains and things like that, this can be the only base mat that you ever use. Absolutely, you'll have a great time.
You can also just make one. So here, I'll give my crafty 2 cents with that. If you want to have something kind of durable like that, and if you're at least a little crafty, you can make one of those out of like fabric. I mean, you wouldn't be able to draw on it, obviously. Something we thought about doing, maybe just felt, is actually really cheap when you get it by the yard. There's always like clearance fabrics too. Like one thing we've been meaning to do is get like an ocean-looking water one, because we have a pirate game, so there you can make your own grid. But that one you can draw on. So
this is one that we made actually. This is we sort of mentioned it earlier. We got this on clearance. It was a few dollars. You can see it's quite sizable.
I almost died.
And it's held up quite well. We use it for pretty much any outdoor.
We use that one a lot.
Yeah, on grass, anytime on grass. And that's a few dollars and about an hour's worth of drawn lines. But you know, hopefully you got something on in the background. Another thing is you can get this. There's only certain types of foam I would recommend. This is it's called Foamular. I think we can get it in there. This one's a thicker one. It comes in 1/2 inch as well. This is a full inch, and you can use this for big chunks of like earthy terrain. You know, where you want like raised edges and things like that.
If you want to know like a little bit more about like ways to make terrain, I did a little video on that. I did have a focus on the 3D printing, but I did talk about, I showed some of the pieces like this.
Like this.
Yeah, but there's a whole video on that, so.
And this is, if you've seen people playing with Dwarven Forge or things like that, like if you watch people play online, especially Critical Role, they do them.
This video is not for Warhammer. We should point that out, because if you're going to play Warhammer, then...
Yes, Warhammer, unless you are playing with some pretty relaxed people, by all means, you and your friends can sit around and build some Lego Warhammers or
That's
just...
not a ghost,
drawings.
it's a cat.
Yes, it's a ghost. Yes, he's cute. But it's...
That's cute.
But yeah, Warhammer is a very expensive hobby. Magic the Gathering is a very expensive hobby. And this is by far, like I said, you can legitimately play this for free forever. So this is the cheapest hobby. These are just options that you have. Yeah. By no means do you need to get a 3D printer and start making tiles. By no means do you need to buy minis. By no means do you even need to make all these little tokens. Like I said, I spent years, about a full decade of my life playing with just little using dice as indicators and just whatever pawns we had laying around. So you don't need anything at all.
So there you go. That's how you can play for free, or if you want to up your game a little bit by little bits without putting too much money into it, some solutions for you. If you have stuff that you've done, put in the comments so maybe
absolutely.
someone else can you know, get some more tips and tricks down there, because I mean, I'm sure all sorts of people have used all sorts of crazy things. Like I said, that I read somebody in one of the groups. He said that they had an impromptu game and they had a very young child, so they had these ridiculously oversized like stuffed animals and like weird blocks, and they ended up having a really fun time. So, I mean, it's all about imagination. The markers are mostly for reference. You could even just get a notebook. Like draw little X's on places and be like, you're here now, you're here now. Like,
Yeah, almost like a football playbook sort of thing, or
Yeah.
I guess that's any sort of sports playbooks.
yeah, and then with all that, like we said, you don't need to buy the books. Like, you can start now and try it out, see if you like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You probably will like it if you're watching this video. Clearly, you're probably watching something like
almost
Critical Role.
almost an hour of video.
Yeah, you should give it a whirl.
Yeah, I mean, on the subject of Critical Role, you can watch the first couple dozen episodes of that, maybe even 50 or so. Matt was using hand-drawn maps.
Yeah.
Their tokens were real tokens, but the actual maps were all hand-drawn. So don't think that you have to spend money.
Yeah.
No. And he's got a Dwarven Forge sponsorship, so of course he uses it. But you don't have to.
Yeah. So I hope this helped you. If you liked it, give us a like, subscribe. Maybe I can learn to talk. Maybe I'll learn to talk if you like the video.
Yeah. And like I sort of touched on, I do plan to do another video where I show you how one of those reusable flip mats, the little roll-up one that I showed you, and a notebook full of graph paper could be the last tools you ever need to create infinite dungeons quickly and easily on the fly, last minute, for those times when your party says, oh, we're not going there, we're going to go over here.
Have the backup plans ready.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think that's it.
But I believe that's it. Yeah. Thanks so much. Welcome to the collective, and
We'll see you next time.
Bye.